All right, on this episode of Bowks Talking Bouts, excited to be talking to an individual who's set in a featured fight going down at 1/158. June 3rd is when that transpires. We have Odie Delaney and Mehdi Barghi getting out there into the one circle to test skills, and very happy to be welcoming Odie onto the show. How's your day going so far, man?
Oh, it's going great. And yeah, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, great getting to talk to you, especially after like such an emphatic entrance into the one championship ranks there, the victory over Thomas Narmo there. Fairly unique, kind of unorthodox maneuver, like a hammerlock kind of variation there. Like, what were your thoughts on the debut and how that unfurled overall? It seemed like it went very well.
Well, first, it's an Odie lock. We got to make sure we get that right.
Let's go.
It's an Odie lock. No, but no, that was an amazing, bout. It was an amazing first fight with one championship. I was very happy with how it went. Yeah, and I'm a goofy guy, man. Like, my submission game isn't totally traditional, I guess we could say. But I think I'm pretty much dangerous from any position. I've got a lot of tools in that bag. So yeah, I think like you said, it's kind of more unorthodox, and you're going to see a lot more of that as I go.
Yeah, and that kind of segues into my next question, because I saw you had the Odie lock instructional video going on there. Like, how much does it, I guess, bolster your technique and what you're doing on a competition level to like try to teach people technique and impart that to them?
Oh man, that's how I think you really, really start to refine your game, is when you start teaching, young people, just other people, because it really forces you to pay attention to the details. They say there's two people that pay attention to fundamentals, and that's masters and beginners. So you always got to go back to that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I guess like you talk about how you have kind of like an unorthodox sort of game. Like, I mean, how much of that is informed by, because you've got a very strong wrestling pedigree. Like, it seems like the technique in that regard, it's almost like a catch wrestling kind of thing in a sense, where it's like you're using your like very refined wrestling technique to create like submission oriented kind of finishes. Like, it's a very curious kind of style there. Do you think it comes from the wrestling largely?
100%. Yeah, it has kind of developed into like a catch wrestling type thing, because I ever for the chance at a submission. I will always have dominant position before I even try to attempt a submission hold. And that's just the way I've always done it, and it's worked for me. And yeah, it is a little bit unorthodox, because it's not as, roly-poly, as I call it, as jiu-jitsu. But it's definitely effective. It's definitely worked well for me, and yeah, I think it's gonna continue to do so for sure.
Yeah, and I mean, it must excite you to be within this ever-growing weight category. Like, I feel like one of the weight divisions that's really beefed up in one championship over the last little bit has been that heavyweight kind of category. So I would think that as a competitor, the depth of the division as it keeps growing is enticing to you.
Oh yeah, it's very, very exciting. And with this deal with they just signed a deal with Amazon. That's just gonna really accelerate that growth in that division. It's already an extremely tough division, and just more and more guys will keep filling it out. So yeah, I've got a target-rich environment, if you will.
Yeah, and I mean, working at a place like American Top Team, I mean, there's no shortage of like great bodies to get and work with. So I imagine you get a lot of great heavyweight looks when you're training at ATT.
Yeah, I'm up in ATT Asheville nowadays, but yeah, same thing. I mean, I'm going to probably be here for my entire career. I've got the best coaches and training partners I could ever ask for. So yeah, I love training at American Top Team. It's been very good to me my entire fight career.
And I kind of ask a lot of the one fighters this, because I'm sort of curious as far as like how the camp and everything is curated with certain people fighting in one under the differing global rule set. Like, do you have to curate your camp differently? Do you have like other one championship fighters in the camp that you can kind of like, I guess, trade techniques and stuff like that? Or is it mostly like unified rules kind of fighters large in part?
Yeah, it's mostly unified rules, but it's not it's definitely not a problem. I mean, it's not like there's a huge adjustment that needs to be made, especially with my style. My style of kind of that, Division I riding technique into submission, into ground and pound. There's not a lot that has to be adjusted, if that makes sense. It doesn't really change my game plan a whole lot. So no, it hasn't really been a problem at all. I mean, it's just something you have to be mindful of.
Yeah, and I mentioned the deep wrestling pedigree earlier, like, the Citadel Athletic Hall of Fame, and just really a laundry list of accomplishments. I could probably talk for 20 minutes running them off. But, I mean, just getting into the sport and everything like that, was there always, like, I guess, an end goal kind of idea in as far as transferring that base to MMA, or, like, what happened with integrating yourself into mixed martial arts?
Yeah, at first that definitely wasn't the plan, actually. I had competed in college, did very well, was very happy with what I had done. Got into law enforcement. That kind of took a turn 3 or 4 years in, and I was left to there was kind of a point in my life where I had to kind of reinvent myself. And looking at the skills that I had and the gifts that I had been given, I decided that I could use martial arts to do some good in the world. And that's when I kind of shifted my direction, if you will, and went wholeheartedly into MMA. But it wasn't a difficult transition. I mean, getting back in shape was difficult. Kind of maintaining mental health as I was going through what I was going through. As far as picking up jiu-jitsu and striking, I mean, that kind of came naturally for me. I think I'm a natural competitor, thank God, and so it's been very fluid.
Well, that's interesting. That kind of almost shows, like, the growth of the sport in a certain way, because I'll hear certain interviews with guys like Dan Severn who were like, oh, yeah, like, the integrating of the strikes was almost kind of like it's not in your muscle memory competitively, but I guess that was, like, a fluid kind of thing for you, maybe indicative of, like, evolution in the sport, perhaps.
Yeah, for sure. And, I think that MMA is still young. I mean, when you compare it to like Muay Thai or boxing or kickboxing, I mean, it's still a young striking sport, and it's not the same. You can take, technique and certain philosophies from the other striking disciplines and kind of integrate them in, but MMA is always going to be a little bit different because of the threat of the takedown, the small gloves, the cage. I mean, it is kind of like ping pong and tennis is the comparison I like to make a lot. It looks similar, but it's not the same. Yeah. So that's kind of a helpful thing for a wrestler who's learning striking is it's not such a like concrete discipline that has like a set meta, if you will. There's a lot of different ways to win in mixed martial arts, and that makes it opportunistic for a guy like me.
Yeah, and you kind of briefly touched on it there, just like that transition period from just your previous kind of line of work there as a police officer to what you're doing now there. And I think you've been doing a lot of really great stuff with like the mental health advocacy, like talking about the severe panic attacks and everything like that. Like, how important has that been for you to get out there? Because it seemed like at one point you were almost like, I don't know if I want to put this out there necessarily, which is fair enough. I mean, you could definitely keep that as like a personal thing if you so choose to. But like, why did you, I guess, want to have that story out there and have that as part of like how you use your platform?
Yeah, well, it's because I almost felt like there's a responsibility to share that story. And the reason is, I mean, our culture kind of lends itself to mental health issues because we're kind of taught through media and the people around us that having mental struggle, being in those dark places is almost like some sort of form of weakness. And that's a lie. Life is hard. People go through things. People lose loved ones. People, are victimized and, have trauma, and just the list goes on. And the thing is, this kind of hallmark story that people like to paint that your life is supposed to go, that's not realistic. And that's not how it goes for most people. Most people at some point in their life will have a really hard time. And the thing is that I want to get across is that's okay. I put that story out there and kind of shared my bout with, depression and, being on the very edge of suicide. I wanted to put that out there. It is kind of embarrassing, but it shouldn't be. And I want to empower people that get into that spot, to get into that dark place, that it can get better. Just because you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel doesn't mean that your life can't change for the better and that you can make it out of that hole. And I think I'm kind of a walking testimony to that. I mean, I've got a very loving wife who's my best friend, who just could never have asked for a better partner. I've got 2 beautiful children who love me to death. I wake up every morning and roll over and watch my little girl, 7-month-old, smile at my face. And it's like, man, I was a finger twitch away from losing all of that. And if I don't speak up about that reality, man, like, it's almost selfish. It's almost, negligent on my part, because I want people to see that doesn't have to be your reality. And if you're in that spot, it's not necessarily the end. And you can reach out, and it's not weakness. It's actually a sign of strength.
Well, yeah, you're addressing just something that's, going on for sure. And I kind of get what you mean. There's still like that certain like vulnerability with putting stuff like that out there. But I mean, who knows? Like you said, I mean, you were just right in that like precipice kind of situation. Maybe someone hears your story and it inspires them to want to take up martial arts or just like change their life direction. So, I mean, have you had any like anecdotal interaction like that where people have kind of like reached out saying like, oh, I appreciate you doing this and everything like that?
Yeah, and that's kind of a big success story, in getting on one and getting to have that platform. And I got, for like even a second just after my win, to speak out about mental health, and people started messaging me. And I'm obviously going to protect them, but I've already been able to get some good out of that and help people, and that's just, man, it's like, that was my entire goal, and I didn't know it was going to happen so fast. So yeah, it's meant the world, and I also want to develop it too. I don't know what that's going to look like yet. I'm still very young in this. I don't have a large background in kind of social work, but me and my management are talking about what the next steps are going to look like as my name grows. I want to be able to use my platform to go speak to young people about, suicide, but also kind of an anti-hate message, because I don't know if you know what's going on, in the news, but hatred, the end of the kind of how hatred plays out is it starts as a little seed in your heart, and as it grows, man, you get these horrible, horrific things that are going on right now, these mass shootings. And it's just, people need to do more to combat that. It's not enough to get on Facebook and say thoughts and prayers. It doesn't help anybody. You actually have to, in my mind, take a little bit of action to make a difference. And I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to do that beyond what I'm doing. But yeah, stay tuned, man. It's gonna be good.
Yeah, and you had touched on it there with some of the recent news there. And like prior to you debuting in one championship, I admittedly didn't know that you were one of the officers on the scene at the Dillon Roof, church shooting and everything like that. Like, do you have a very visceral reaction when a lot of these stories pop up, like Buffalo and the recent Texas school shooting? I can't even imagine how that would feel.
Yeah, it hits me really hard because, man, okay, first of all, it's whenever children are involved and are victimized, that just amplifies the pain 1,000-fold. But also just kind of having been very close to a situation like that, as the ripple effect that it has in the community, it definitely it can foster more hatred, resentment, in people that have, lost or experienced that, were close to it. It can, man, it just rips a hole. It just rips a hole. All the law enforcement that had to go in there, all the EMS firefighters that went in there to clean up what that person did, their lives will never be the same. And the victimization has not stopped at the 21 people. It's gonna change and drastically affect hundreds of people for the rest of their lives. So yeah, it does hit me. It does hit me hard because I definitely am very aware of like the extent of damage that something like this causes.
Yeah, and that's one of the unfortunate parts of that kind of stuff existing in like a news cycle kind of context, because you don't really get like the long form, like how this is affecting people. Like, it's not just an isolated one day kind of incident. It's just, like you said, the rest of people's lives.
Yeah, and the other thing that frustrates me is, I haven't heard one of the victims' names yet. All I've heard about is the shooter and then the political each other. The Democrats want gun control, Republicans are kind of crapping on them for wanting gun control. And it's just like, man, like, as a society, we completely focus on the wrong things. Like, families are hurting. Real people lost their lives. We don't need to be focusing on the scumbag that pulled the trigger. And we definitely don't need to be focusing on politics. It's like, man, Like the whole idea of never waste a tragedy is so heartless on both sides, and I'm ashamed of both of them. You know, it's just disgusting. It's like we should be focusing on the families that lost, supporting the you know, the emergency personnel that were there, supporting the families. It's like we just as a country we focus on the wrong thing, and I just think it makes it worse in the long run.
Yeah, very well said, man. You hate to see that kind of stuff politicized. It's just not at all the time for something like that at all. But I mean, just like, yeah.
No, not at all.
Yeah, you hate to see it. It's just terrible. But I mean, just considering the, you know, myriad of experiences you've had, you just seem like just a very positive guy, and it seems like it resonates with a lot of people, even like your fellow competitors. Like I was talking to Dustin Johnson after his last fight, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I met Odie Delaney. He's like a real nice guy. Super happy to meet him." And then he was like new best friends, and kind of having a laugh there.
Yeah, no, I try to live what I speak. The thing is with martial arts for me, it's very different than I think a lot of competitors. I'm not here to talk crap about other fighters. I'm not here to kind of, you know, talk about how much better than them I am. And, you know, this kind of the way Western martial arts has gone, where it's all just a giant hatred tossing fest. That's not what I'm about at all. You know, there might come a day when me and Johnson fight, and that's fine. But the thing is, I'm never going to treat anybody without respect and dignity, and that's just how you treat people. You know, it's the golden rule: treat people how you want to be treated. So, I mean, inside the cage, it's, you know, we're competing, we're athletes. This is a sport, you know, and I think that line has kind of got blurred in some of the other promotions, where one is very, very good, I think, about kind of keeping that compartmentalized. You know, like there's the sport where you go in, yes, it's a violent sport, but there's also that martial arts ethos that needs to be protected, where we have respect for one another. It's about honor. Martial arts ultimately is traditionally been about self-defense, not offensive assault, which you've seen in other promotions. So I think they're going about it the right way, and I just want to continue to be a part of that and continue to live that.
Yeah, for sure, and continuing to live that in the form of this upcoming fight against Mehdi Barghi and everything like that. I'm kind of wondering, just based on what you've seen from, I guess, watching tape, or even like your coaches kind of watching tape on him, like what does he do really well in your estimation?
I think he has a very strong left hand, and he's very explosive. He's very athletic. I think he's in the wrong weight class, if I'm being honest. I think that he's a light heavyweight. I think his frame is a little bit small for heavyweight. But this entire camp, I've treated him as if he's the best fighter in the world, and that's how I prepared. And that's how I'll always prepare. I'll always prepare like the next fight is the biggest fight of my life, because it is. So yeah, I've definitely not looked past him. I've treated him in my camp with the utmost respect, and that's all going to show when I get in the cage and fight him. There's not going to be any surprises.
Yeah, and definitely some heavyweight representation on this card overall, with Buchecha getting out there. Like, obviously you have a, you know, defined focus on your fight specifically, but is there like some kind of like adjacent check out what's going on with that particular fight sort of consideration, just studying the weight category kind of thing?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, Buchecha was a teammate of mine when I was down in Coconut Creek for a couple of years. He's a brother in Christ. You know, he's a man of faith like myself. He's a very respectful, true martial artist, and I just think the world of him. Now, that being said, yes, I think eventually me and him will fight, and in my estimation, it'll probably be for a belt or a contender spot for the belt, and that's going to be awesome. That's going to be a fight the entire world is going to want to tune into and watch, because it's going to be a 5-round bloody battle, because he's a tough dude. I think he's probably one of the toughest guys in the division, if not the toughest. It's just a matter of time before he can prove it. And that goes for both of us. And yeah, it'll be a great honor to meet him eventually. So yeah, I'll be definitely paying attention and watching. But yeah, I wish him all the best of luck. I hope he wins.
Yeah, for sure. It's such a, you know, cool weight category to be looking at, and I mean, I could definitely see you guys in that kind of, you know, context, like you're talking about either a title eliminator or a title fight outright. But in talking about certain,
people are already talking about it, like if you look at the forums and stuff, like people want that fight. It's not necessarily time yet. The thing is, it would be wasted right now because we're both have such a small record in the division, that one championship. It would kind of be wasted. I think that there's a lot to be built up here. You know, watch him crush 5-6 fights, watch me crush 5-6 fights, and then it could be something glorious. So that's kind of my dream. But like I said, I don't look past fights. I don't look too far into the future. But if we're just dreaming for a second, yeah, that's the dream.
No, for sure, man. I mean, you guys are both very skilled, so I mean, not a crazy thing to posit it could play out that way. But just talking about the title picture presently here, just with Arjun Buller and Anatoly Malaikin kind of getting ready for that unification clash. I mean, not like an official kind of date as of yet, but like, what are your thoughts on how that one plays out?
I think it's interesting because I think a lot of guys that fight them both respectively, they get beat before they walk into the cage, and I think that they both have a huge intimidation factor, and I think that's kind of what has given them a little bit of success. Like Kirill, I honestly thought Kirill was going to win that fight, but I think, like I say, there's a little bit of that fear factor that gets brought in. Now, when they both fight each other, I'm very interested to see which one can maintain their confident composure and get in there. I just really hope it doesn't turn into one of these things where you got two dangerous human beings and they just dance around each other scared for 5 rounds. Yeah. I'm hoping at least one of them maintains the mentality that they've had and goes in there and gets it done. So we'll see. It's going to be an exciting fight, though, for sure.
Absolutely, for sure. Just a great landscape for the heavyweight division, as has been kind of the refrain from me throughout this conversation. But just, yeah, always been a fan of the big lads, and cool to see that ever growing in one and everything. But I do want to be mindful of your schedule, man. I don't want to cut too much into what I presume is your next interview here. So is there anything you might want to add? Oh, sweet. Well, I guess that kind of works out for sure. But I feel like I've kind of... Yeah, shout out to AJ from Epoch for, setting that up and everything. How's that dynamic been for you?
Man, I'll tell you what, Epoch is the future of MMA management. I know that I'm biased because I'm with them, but I wasn't always with them. I'm not going to say out loud, but I was with other major management teams that just do not work as hard as this guy has worked for me, and is not. The thing is, our what would you say? Our value systems are very much aligned as far as honesty, open communication, expectations. I mean, me and him are just kind of 2 peas in a pod. So, yeah, you're going to see Epoch grow quickly, really, really quickly.
That sounds awesome. It sounds like that ideal thing people want to have, where it's like just doing good business with good people.
Yeah, man. I mean, the sport of MMA is kind of it's a brutal landscape, man, because a lot of promoters, they're kind of leeching off fighters, if I'm being honest. They cast a wide net. They'll sign, 250 guys and give them no attention until somebody makes it, and then they're taking 20% of your money. And it's just, and everyone knows that's happening, but can't do anything about it because there's no options. And yeah, I think Epoch's going to kind of fill that hole in the market where, you can go in with confidence knowing that you're going to be taken care of as an athlete, and money is not the only thing on your management's mind.
Yeah, that whole culture definitely needs to be subverted quite a bit, but that's a separate conversation altogether. I mean, I feel like we could go off a fair bit with that there. But yeah, great insights, man, and just wanted to have you on the show for a little bit now, so cool we could set this up for sure. But I'm curious if there's anything you might want to add as a parting thought as we're kind of wrapping up, Odie.
Yeah, I want to take a quick moment to shout out my sponsor, Master Auto. It's my aunt and uncle up in Alaska. They've been with me since the beginning of my fight career, always have believed in me, and I really wouldn't be able to do it without them. It's been great. I also my teammates, ATT Asheville, the coaches there, they've done so much extra work for me, hours and hours outside of normal training time, and I just, none of this is possible without guys like that. And then, most importantly, my wife, Savannah, none of this works without her. We've got 2 little kids at home. She has to sacrifice a lot for me to be able to chase these dreams and to get the platform to do good in the world and everything else. And what people don't realize is without her, none of this happens. None of this happens at all. It just doesn't work. So huge shout out to my wife, who's been just always there for me, supporting me, picking me up in times of weakness. But yeah, that's kind of my last spiel there. I look forward to this fight. Everyone needs to tune in because it's going to be a good one. And yeah, I'll catch you on the flip side.
Yeah, some great parting thoughts for sure, and this is going to be a great fight June 3rd at 158 when Odie Delaney and Mehdi Barghi take to the one circle. Thanks so much for coming on, man. Always fun getting to, chop it up a little bit with the one fighters, and yeah, cool to, see your trajectory going forward and everything, and just, looking forward to peeping the fight when it goes down.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. We'll talk soon.